for 7 years. And so I'm here today because I have a residency that's kind of like housed in the University of Iowa at a place called the Center for Afrofuturist Studies. And I'm there because I'm working on a sci-fi that I've been writing for about a year. And for the sci-fi, I actually invented a language. So today we're going to kind of do an activity where we think about language invention. So first, before we start, can I get everyone's name? Cool, I guess we can just go into the row, like, yeah, across and then. Cool. Mila. Anastasia.
Zoe. Charles. Naisha. Morgan. Kaya. Corinne. Emma. Oh, Jaden.
Jaden.
Olivia. Hey, Dominic. Virginia. Carrie.
Cool, and you guys are English students, right? Okay, cool. So the first thing we're going to talk about, so these two words are phrases. What's one thing, so what do we know about them? How are they similar? They're both words. Are they words that you would find in the dictionary?
No.
So why wouldn't you find them in the dictionary?
Because they're so slang.
Right, they're made up, exactly. And so they're specifically words that were made up to express emotions or feelings that didn't really have words for them before, right? So the first part of this activity that I want everyone to do, if you have a pencil and paper, I want you to write down and describe 3 emotions or experiences that you don't have a word for, right? And so this is kind of like the 3 examples I was using for myself. So like when you've never, so like a lot of times in New York, I'll meet a lot of artists and I'll see them online, but I've never actually met them in person. And so when I do meet them in person, because I've only seen them on social media, it feels like I'm meeting a celebrity. But I don't really have a word for that experience, right? Something else also that's been happening in New York City recently is we'll have one day that feels like summer and the next day feels like fall. And I also don't really have a word for that either. And the last kind of experience or emotion I was thinking about was how I'm sure you've all experienced is when you hear a song, usually a hip-hop song, but it can be any genre, and it sounds totally different when you hear it on really good speakers because there's more bass in it, right? So I think take about like 5 minutes and kind of just describe 3 emotions or experiences that you have no word for. This can also be like a facial expression maybe you don't have a word for. I feel like there are so many facial expressions I make that I don't know how I would describe it. Maybe there's a word for, this happens a lot when it's like, it's summertime, but then you have to bring a sweater with you because it's super cold inside. And so while you guys are working on that, I'm going to play a video.
To many,
Can you guys hear that?
one of the coolest things about Game of Thrones is that the inhabitants of the Dothraki Sea have their own...
Maybe I can like put the mic too, just to the computer.
I think it's this. Do you have?
I think it flows into the LCD projector. The speakers,
Put it into.
and it's audio in or out, I think.
Check it because then it's last.
I think, is that coming out of that one? Yes, it is. There you go. I'll try that.
Cool.
real language. And Dothraki Dothraki came hot on the heels of the real language that the...
Now this is on.
So maybe we'll just
Should I plug it into here?
yeah, we'll just
Though? Oh, yeah.
do this one instead.
Okay.
Try.
Does it reach?
Hold on, let me untangle it.
You may have to move it over.
Okay, well, we can do that. We probably should move the black one over.
How can I do that?
Yeah, this would work.
How's that?
There we go.
Yay.
To many, one of the coolest things about Game of Thrones is that the inhabitants of the Dothraki Sea have their own real language. And Dothraki came hot on the heels of the real language that the Not-Be speak. But surely the Not-Be needed when Klingons and Star Trek have had their own whole language since 1979. And let's not forget the Elvish languages in J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings trilogy, especially since that is the official grandfather of the fantasy conlangs. Conlang is short for constructed language. They're more than codes like Pig Latin, and they're not just collections of fabricated slang like the Nadzat lingo that the teen hoodlums in A Clockwork Orange speak, where Droog from Russian happens to mean friend. What makes conlangs real languages isn't the number of words they have. It helps, of course, to have a lot of words. Dothraki has thousands of words. Not-Be started with 1,500 words. Fans on websites have steadily created more. But we can see the difference between vocabulary alone and what makes a real language from a look at how Tolkien put together grand old Elvish, a conlang with several thousand words. After all, you could memorize 5,000 words of Russian and still be barely able to construct a sentence. A 4-year-old would talk rings around you. That's because you have to know how to put the words together. That is, a real language has grammar. Elvish does. In English, to make a verb pass, you add an ed, wash, washed. In Elvish, wash is alu, and washed is alune. Real languages also change over time. There's no such thing as a language that's the same today as it was 1,000 years ago. As people speak, they drift into new habits, shed old ones, make mistakes, and get creative. Today, one says, "Give us today our daily bread." In Old English, they said, Things change in conlangs, too. Tolkien charted out ancient and newer versions of Elvish. When the first elves awoke at Quivian, in their new language, the word for people was Quendi. But in the language of one of the groups that moved away, Teleri, over time, Quendi became Pendi, with the K turning into a P. And just like real languages, conlangs like Elvish split off into many. When the Romans transplanted Latin across Europe, French, Spanish, and Italian were born. When groups moved to different places, over time their ways of speaking grow apart, just like everything else about them. Thus, Latin's word for hand was manus, but in French it became main, while in Spain it became mano. Tolkien made sure Elvish did the same kind of thing. While that original word Quendi became Pendi among the Teleri, among the Avari who spread throughout Middle-earth, it became Kindi when the W dropped out. The Elvish varieties Tolkien fleshed out the most are Quenya and Sindarin, and their words are different in the same way French and Spanish are. Quenya has soup for drink, Sindarin has soul. And as you know, real languages are messy. That's because they change, and change have a way of working against order, just like in a living room or on a bookshelf. Real languages are never perfectly logical. That's why Tolkien made sure that Elvish had plenty of exceptions. Lots of verbs are conjugated in ways you just have to know. Take even the word know. In the past, it's new, which isn't explained by any of the rules in English. Oh well. In Elvish, no is ista, but new is sinte. Oh well. The truth is, though, that Elvish is more a sketch for a real language than a whole one. For Tolkien, Elvish was a hobby rather than an attempt to create something.
I know.
Oh, poor bandwidth.
Uh-huh.
You'll get 10 gigabits of bandwidth very soon. 10 gigabits.
Cool, so while this is loading, so a part of when I was making my sci-fi and inventing this language, I I was at a bookstore in New York and I actually found this book called The Art of Language Invention, which was does anyone watch Game of Thrones? Great. So they actually hired someone to invent the languages for that show. And the person they hired, David J. Peterson, wrote this book that actually tells you how to invent your own language. And so I basically used this book as a guide in inventing the language for my story, which is called Hot Nahans. And I used it to help me build a grammar and also a sound system. So one thing I want to focus on today is thinking about sounds. And so if everyone can write down this chart on a piece of paper, and then I can explain kind of and break down. So I want to talk about different types of sounds and kind of think about how like conlanging or inventing languages is very much kind of like building something, right? So you kind of start with your foundation and then you kind of use bricks and build up. And so the foundation of any language is its sound system. We just got the gist of it. And so what do all of these sounds or letters rather have in common? What are these? Right, these are vowels, right? And so then the rest of the letters are consonants, right? And so does anyone have any idea what these two columns in the middle might have in common? Say it one more time. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly right. So remind me your name. So like Dominic said, so these sounds, so B and P, both have the same mouth placement when you pronounce them, as do D and T, G and K, V and F, and Z and S. Does anyone know how they're different, or how you make them sound differently? Okay, so there are many categories of consonant sounds, but two categories I want to focus on today are voiced and unvoiced consonants. So essentially, a voiced consonant is a consonant that when you say it, you vibrate your vocal cords. And an unvoiced consonant is a consonant sound that when you make it, you don't vibrate your vocal cords. So literally, when the B sound, the B sound, and the P sound, the only difference is that when you say a B sound, you're vibrating your vocal cords, and when you're saying a P sound, you're not. So if you can put your finger to your throat and say B, B, you feel the vibration, right? But if you say P, there's less vibration, right? And the same with D and T, right? D, there's more vibration than T. There's not really any, right? And the same with G and K. So with both of those letters, you're using your mouth is forming the same kind of shape, and you're using the same parts of your mouth to produce these sounds, but one you vibrate your vocal cords and another you don't. And so one thing that's interesting about the Not-V language that was that was created for the Avatar movies is that they only use unvoiced consonants, right? And so then these are called nasals. And nasals essentially, so when you make a M sound, you're actually forming the same shape that you make with the B and the P sound. So it's like P, B, M. You're using both of your lips. But the only difference when you make the M sound is that you're vibrating your vocal cords and you're breathing through your nose. And that's why they're called nasals. And so with an N sound, when you say a D, T, and N, you're also forming your mouth in the same shape and using your mouth in the same way that when you make an N sound, but the only difference is that with an N sound, you're breathing through your nose when you make it, right? And so one activity I want to try, if you've copied down this chart, I want to start us thinking about sound systems and how different languages have sounds and others don't, right? So if anyone speaks Spanish, do we have any Spanish speakers? So one thing you'll notice is that the Z sound in Spanish sounds like an S, right? So there's no, it's not voiced, right? And so I want to start with everyone creating their own individual sound system in a more simplified way. So the first part I want to do is in the vowel section, I want everyone to cross out one vowel. So you can't use one vowel. So the language I created, there's no O sound. And there are also languages where O and U are interchangeable, right? So one vowel you can't have. So So everyone got their vowel removed? And so after you've picked a vowel that you don't want to use, I want you to go to these two columns, and I either want you to eliminate all the voiced or all the unvoiced consonants. Yep. Okay, so voiced, you vibrate your vocal cords, and voiced consonants also tend to sound heavier. And then these unvoiced, you don't vibrate your vocal cords, so they tend to sound lighter and choppier. Yeah. Everyone got that? Okay, and then I also want you to eliminate one nasal, M or N. And so I also kind of made this miscellaneous kind of group of letters as well. These are also kind of have their own like descriptions of how the sounds are made. But one thing I did want to focus on are the W and Y. What's something we notice about the W and Y sound? Anyone have any idea? So W and Y are actually vowel sounds that can also function as consonant sounds. So if you say what, if you say ooh what, the W is actually a U sound. And if you say yes, right, if you say yes, the Y is actually a long I sound. Which is also like in the word quick, right? Like quick, we use like the W functions kind of as a consonant and as a vowel. And so why do you think I separated these letters? I'll give you a hint. Right? So you can use other sounds to construct these. So these are actually multiple sounds. Right? Cool. And so down here, so from this group of letters, I want you to eliminate 2. Then after you've eliminated 2 from those, I want you to eliminate one of these. Yeah, one or the other. Cool, so everyone got those eliminated? And so now what we're going to do, so you've basically started to build a sound system for your language, right? So you have the sounds that are going to make up all the words in your language. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go back to what we did originally, and I want you to make words for all of the emotions and kind of experiences that you described using the sound system. Oh my gosh. Yes. So you've gone through this list of sounds, right? And you've eliminated the sounds. And so now you're going to create words for the kind of emotions and experiences you described at the beginning of the activity, but using only the sounds that you have left. Yeah. And if you need some help, let me know. You can. And if you make your words super quickly, so if you make nouns, I want you to also create a plural version of that noun. And if you create a verb, I want you to create a present tense and past tense version of the verb. And there's something else that's interesting is there are languages that, apart from singular and plural, also have words for when there's two of something. So you can also do that as well. And so also just to like, if you're kind of stuck on like, how do I make a plural of something or how, so like in my language, the way you make plurals of things is by elongating the first vowel. So in many languages, a lot of like words, how do I explain this? So like in many languages, they have different vowel lengths that change the meaning of something, right? So like in English, we have long and short vowels, but they don't change the meaning of something. So like if you say the word long, if everyone says the word long, the O in long is a long vowel. But if you say the word lot, the O is short. And if you say the word bag, that's a long A, right? But if you say bat, it's short. So in my language, you basically change the length of the vowel to make it plural. You make it longer to make it plural, and it's singular if it's shorter.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So how's the word invention coming? Anyone have any words they want to share? Yep. Say it again. Xylophone? Like the X? Wait, say that one more time? Sorry. What about a xylophone? Yeah, that works. Yeah. Cool. So how's it coming along?
For me, this is great learning.
Oh.
Because I remember going back into my primary grades in school in the 70s, part of the 80s.
Yeah.
Did a lot of syllabication and
Uh-huh.
phonemic awareness and this great. I never used that because I forgot the vowels.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. So the next part of the activity that I want to try after everyone gets their words done is, so one thing that's interesting that John McMurdo, the linguist in the video, mentioned is that languages tend to change, right, over time, and they usually tend to change when groups are isolated from each other. So like he said, with the Romance languages, you had Latin. So there was Latin that was kind of spoken among scholars in like the upper class, I guess we could say in like contemporary terms, of the Roman Empire. And then there was Vulgar Latin, which was essentially the Latin that was of the people. And so basically French, Spanish, Portuguese, all the Romance languages have basically evolved from Vulgar Latin because these different groups were isolated from each other. And so it's also the same way that like we get like American accents and British accents, right? We separated. So one activity I want to try, if someone has a word that they invented that they'd like to share, I want to play a game of telephone. And so I want them to start, and then I want us to all say the word to each other and go down the line, and we're going to see how the word is changed by the end. Yeah. Does anyone have a word they want to volunteer? We can do it with more than one word. Okay, so we can do your word, and then we can do yours, and then we can do yours. Okay, so if you want to start if you want to like kind of come to the front row, and then we can like whisper it all the way down. And then at the end you can say what the word originally sounded like, and we'll see how it changed.
Make sure it's clean now.
I know, yeah. Yep.
What was your last prompt? I forgot. Can you show me the last prompt again, or like tell me what it was?
Which one?
The last prompt that you have written out.
These?
I can't whisper, okay? I can't hear myself.
What? Girl.
I can put you back here. It's not my fault.
Right, girl, I cannot find the word. You thought I said diarrhea. Where did I get that from?
Did everyone get an opportunity?
Why did you do that?
All right.
Cool, so what was the word that you heard? Gazebo? What was it originally?
What was the original word?
Oh.
Terra.
Gazebo. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Want to try another word? I think you said, okay, cool. We'll do you and then we'll, yeah. Wait, so, hold on. Gazebo, like that.
Gazebo.
And it went from
Gazebo.
to Terra. Okay.
To gazebo.
That's interesting. I don't know how that happened. Yeah, totally.
Make sure you're not giggling a lot. You know, people need to hear the word. That could have been that more. Terra to gazebo.
Yeah, I see the T and the D. I see that relationship, but that's the only thing. Well, I guess they have the same first two sounds. Oh, how did you, an E? Oh, Tara.
This guy.
What was it? Say it one more time. Kudos? What was the original?
Craft.
Crap.
With a G-H. Like,
Crap. Spell it?
no, C-R-A-G-H.
Craft. Craft. Okay. Okay, we're gonna try one more word. So we'll try yours.
That was a great word, but
Yeah.
not word. How did we get kudos out of crowd? That's an excellent word.
Yeah.
People say like people's names over here. See, I think there's a, I think people need to not talk while they telephone. Hey, try not to talk while you all are telephoning. You know, just so that everyone can hear the word. You know, I think there's a lot of conversation going on. And I know you all had fun with it, but you know, let's be fair to other people.
Well, so what was it? Delu? Spell that? How do you think it'd be spelled?
D-A-N-U-N-U.
D-A-N-U-N-U. Danunu. And so what was it originally? Spell that? Tech. Like that? Texu. Okay.
That's closer, yeah. See, a lot of conversation was occurring between the telephone conversation.
Cool. So, I mean, there are similarities between all of them, right? So we noticed that, this is actually interesting. So we noticed that with the first word, the unvoiced consonant became voiced, right? As well as in the last word. And then in the second word, it retained the k sound. So it's interesting. So German and English actually used to be one language, and then they split. And so actually this transformation we saw from unvoiced to voice actually happened in German and English. So like dance in English is Tanz in German. And I think salad in German is Salat, right? So that does happen. Also Italian and Spanish. Spanish is mercado for grocery store or market. Italian, it's mercato. I'm trying to think of another example. Also, Italian and Spanish, usually where there's like an IE in Spanish, it usually just becomes an E in Italian. And then usually where there's an ST in Italian and Spanish, the S disappears in French. So fiesta, festa, and fete all mean party. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely some like uniformity in how they changed. Does anyone want to share any of the words they made up and what they mean? Yeah. Lapsat? What does that mean?
When something is a downgraded version of something else.
Nice. Nice. Very good. Yeah. Say it again. Aid. Nice. When you wake up at 4 a.m. Very cool. Anyway, yep. Hmm?
Next to the other one was pop, which is basically a scoff.
Cool. Very nice. A scoff. Yep. Very cool. Yep.
I have grit. That's when you stress bake at 4 a.m.
When you stress bake at 4 a.m. Nice. Nice. Any other words? Cool. So something else I've noticed that everyone's already starting to think about, there's something called phonotactics, which is essentially the order that sounds can appear in a language, right? So we all know this word, right? Does this look like an English word? Why doesn't it look like an English word? Right, the TS. In English, words can't begin with TS, right? But they can come at the end of words, right? So this is because in Japanese, words beginning with TS is a part of their phonotactics, whereas in English, TS can only really come in the middle or the end of a word, usually at the end of a word, right? So something else you could start thinking about is what are the orders that sounds can appear in? And it's similarly, whenever there's like an ST in Spanish, it always has to have a vowel sound in front of it, which is why you get like estado in Spanish, but in Italian it's stato. So that's something else you can kind of think about when you're creating your language, is like what order do I want the sounds to appear in? And this is all essentially how languages sound the way they sound, is their sound systems and their phonotactics. And that's something else I was kind of thinking about when I was creating my language. So when I created my language, I was particularly interested in creating a language that sounded phonetically like a combination of Danish, Japanese, and an indigenous African language called Xhosa, which is spoken in South Africa. So my language has one click sound in it, but a lot of click languages usually have multiple click sounds. That was a bit complicated for me, so I only used one. And so this is like kind of like an activity that you can kind of play around with or think about. If you ever want to kind of try out conlanging. Conlanging is also really good when it comes to just like learning about how languages work. Do you guys have any questions or? Yeah, great. That's another step of like conlanging. A lot of conlangers will teach their friends the languages, and they'll also translate things. So you can take text or like poems that you like, and you can translate it into the language that you invented.
So I have, nieces and nephews and cousins and all
Yeah.
Facebook and Twitter and all these other places.
Mm-hmm.
And the language they use, it
Yeah.
just morphs.
Uh-huh.
But it's a language that, this generation understands very well.
Of course, yeah.
So is that a way, is that the conlanging that you're talking about? Is technology promoting conlanging in a way?
Interesting. I guess you could say in a form, right? I mean, language, I think there's we always get new words added to the lexicon of languages, right? There's certain slang terms that from the 20s that if we heard them now, we'd say, what is that?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that's going on, but I do think technology, because everything is instantly transcribed now,
Yeah.
is also having a certain effect. I also think that emojis are also becoming their own type of language. My friend always says that emojis are kind of bringing us back to hieroglyphs, where we just communicate with images. So yeah, I think in a sense it could be a type of form of conlanging. I am super interested, because I also think it's interesting because one of the reasons that for instance, we have British accents and English accents and different accents evolved is because people didn't really hear each other. But now, because we have telephones and FaceTime and all of these things, one theory I've heard is that regional accents are kind of going to disappear and everyone will start to sound more similar. Because it's also not uncommon for people to pick up, when people learn English, it's not uncommon for them to pick up their English accent from people they see on TV, right? So that also happens a lot as well, which I think is super interesting. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
It's a sci-fi film that you're working on?
It's written and I'm making music for it. Yeah.
So your characters are only going to speak the language that you're developing, or will they go between the two?
Yeah, so the sci-fi is actually, I should explain, is a story within a story. So it takes place in a future U.S., and then people within this future U.S. read this comic where the language is spoken. So it's there's English and this language. Yeah.
Everyone understands the comic, the old language. I
Yeah.
guess English is the old language, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's basically when you have people that are fans of Star Trek and they speak Klingon to each other. It's kind of like that. Yeah.
So how is your film, your screenplay, different than Avatar? How many of you all seen Avatar, the movie?
So I think, so I actually it's not Avatar was in outer space, right? Was it?
It was on the planet.
Yeah. So the fictional country I made up is actually an island nation that's south of the African continent, and it works in relation to all the other kind of geopolitical happenings that are going on. So it's kind of based in the real world. Yeah. And it's also, and the people aren't aliens. They're people descended from Africans, so they're black people on this island. Mm-hmm.
So that brings up another question.
Yep.
So you talk about having an island where where people have migrated from the mainland to settle on this island brings up the question of migration.
Yeah, exactly.
So how does migration impacts language?
Exactly. So one of the reasons I actually added a click in my language is because I believe all click languages are from Southern Africa. And so I was thinking, if these people migrated from Southern Africa, then they should have some type of characteristic in their language that's similar. And so that's why I added a click. So I was kind of thinking about also different sounds, because I study and think about a lot of languages, and so I wanted to have a lot of phonetic similarities between the languages spoken in Southern Africa and then the language I created to kind of show that relationship. Mm-hmm.
So I purchased a DVD from California, Israel, just off of the title.
Uh-huh.
And it was called The Language That You Cry.
Oh, wow.
I know, and it traced the song that this woman talked to her grandchildren, talked to her one song was able to trace them back to Sierra Leone.
Oh wow, yeah.
But I mean, it took a lot of years
Mhm.
and a lot of research and almost gave up.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, but as far as you're putting, I mean, because I think it's really interesting that you're using the African tribe and putting them in a different setting. Are they bringing their music?
That's interesting. I imagined it. So I do know that I believe indigenous Australians are also from of African descent, and they like migrated there like thousands of years ago. So I kind of imagined it in that sense, like these people migrated thousands of years ago. And so but I have been thinking about the music and like what would the music sound like. The music that I make, I'm in a kind of a music duo with another artist named Devin Kenny. And we make music as people from this future that are fans of this comic. But I haven't actually started working on like the indigenous music of the island, but that's something I do want to think about.
You know, I could see a club coming out of this.
Yeah.
Colingo.
Conlanging. Conlanging, yeah.
Conlanging club of some sort.
Also conlang.com. There's like a conlanging society. People meet and talk about it as well. So it's a very... Also, is anyone familiar with Esperanto? So Esperanto is actually a conlang that's actually used as like an international auxiliary language, kind of like a language that anyone can learn. It's very simple. And so there are actually people that are like native speakers of it now who grew up speaking it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So it started with Star Trek, you know, with the Klingon.
Well, J.R.R. Tolkien for Lord of the Rings. He's like the grandfather of it. And then, yeah, totally.
Any questions from you all? Any other thoughts? Would you all use this? How would you all use?
YouTube?
Is he broadcasting himself?
Alfredo, can you repeat that, please? What is it called? I'm gonna find out. Type in Alfredo. Well, I don't know. I hope you're not rapping about guns and stuff, but I want to know. I mean, are you speaking of love? Because some of the things Lil Wayne say and Drake, huh? You know, the game. You know, some of the stuff. You know, it's a different lingo. I mean, it's linguistically, linguistically morphing. You know, using some of the English terms and morphing it into a more slang term is lunchtime.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you all. For being
Thank
such
you.
a great group. Yes, sweetheart.
I love sci-fi, by the way, so I hope you can get it onto the sci-fi channel.
Yeah.
So then I can watch it.
Totally. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Cool. Thank you so much.